We're happy today to have Will Bunch with us to share his thoughts on the current political situation in our nation. Afterwards, he will be fielding questions. So if you have one for him, please put it in the chat and we'll select as many as we can for Will to answer in a 5-minute period. If we don't get to your question during the Q&A, Will promises to provide answers to all unanswered questions that we'll include as part of our follow-up email. So take it away, Will.
Hi, thanks so much, Margaret. That was just a fantastic introduction. I really appreciate it. And you know, I don't even know where to start on what a great honor it is to be speaking to this group. You know, I feel like all of us have our different roles to play in making Philadelphia better and making Pennsylvania better and making the country hopefully better. And I think the job that I have is one of the easiest as a newspaper columnist, because I get to stay way behind the front lines and just kind of lob bombs with my columns or my newsletter 3 times a week, which I enjoy, and I think it's important. But I think what all of you do is so much more important, because you guys are out on the front lines. You're doing the hard work. You're giving up time on nights and weekends to go out in your communities and work on issues and talk to voters. And you know, what I do as a columnist in trying to rouse people with words, you guys are the ones who really make it come to life. So I'm just really appreciative and really honored to be here. I also feel that we kind of, in a weird way, I feel like I share an origin story with Philadelphia Neighborhoods Network, because you started in 2004, which is actually the year that I started as an opinion writer. It's the year I started doing my blog that became Attitude, and from my blog Attitude that became a column. And when I say that we share an origin story, what I mean by that is I think we were both motivated by the same things back in 2004, which is we really were seeing the first signs that American democracy was under threat and people weren't doing enough to fight back. You know, I mean, it's kind of funny because I think there's far too many people out there who now look back at George W. Bush and those years in the 2000s with rose-colored glasses, but probably not too many in this group, though. But because we all know that that was a dangerous time for this country. We had a government that lied its way into a war in Iraq, and you know, committed atrocities at Guantanamo Bay and elsewhere. And you know, from that a movement was born that that people on the left, you know, within the Democratic Party, weren't doing enough to stand up for progressive values. And you know, that's why I started writing the column, and that's why you guys founded Philadelphia Neighborhoods Network. And you know, when you look back in those 15 years, clearly, I think you guys would agree with this. The glass is half full, right? I mean, so many progressive issues that people weren't talking about 15 years ago, you know, have either happened here in Philadelphia or on the national front, or are at least being talked about. You know, we've seen a lot of workplace reform bills have passed in city council. You know, we see so many more employers paying living wages. I mean, unfortunately, Philadelphia, and because of Pennsylvania's laws, is behind on the minimum wage, but we've seen other jurisdictions, you know, adopt a $15 living wage. Was mentioned in the intro before the meeting. You guys played a key role in making sure that Philadelphia has a progressive district attorney, and that's brought just so many positive changes, I think, in our criminal justice system. You know, so the glass is half full. At the same time, I know, you know, the end of 2021, beginning now of 2022, I know a lot of people are a little bit down and discouraged. You know, some things like the Build Back Better program, extended child tax credits, and child care, and some of the other great things that are in that bill haven't happened. There needs to be action on climate change. That hasn't happened. And voting rights is a big disappointment. And voting rights is really central to what we're talking about today, which is the threat to American democracy. You know, the 2022 is just going to be such an important year, because because of the threat to democracy, and because the American electorate, unfortunately, is in a very restive mood. And getting back to what I said at the beginning about you guys being on the front lines, that's why I think what you guys are going to be doing is so important, because uh, when you talk to average citizens, it's going to be up to people like you, who I think for the most part get it. They get that with these voter suppression bills, with these bills that are going to affect the vote counting, with some of the other things that the Republican Party is up to right now, that if the Republicans take control of Congress and take greater control of our state houses, democracy is really going to be in big trouble. And when you guys are out there talking to everyday voters, you're the ones who are going to have to, I think, explain to a lot of average people who maybe don't get it yet why this is so important. And like Margaret said in her introduction, I mean, so much of this really came to life for people on January 6, 2021. I mean, that was just such a memorable and crazy day. The crazy thing about it is, I mean, you could see it coming, right? I mean, I had actually hoped to go to Washington on January 6th, and at the last minute, I realized I couldn't go because of I had a medical procedure coming up, and being around five or 10,000 unmasked Trump supporters at the height of the COVID surge didn't seem like a good idea. So like all of you, I watched it from afar, and watching it from afar was shocking to see people throwing fire extinguishers at police officers, people beating police officers with flagpoles, breaking windows, smashing into the Capitol, while our senators and Congress representatives were scurrying for their lives in some cases. I don't think any of us thought we were going to see a day like that in our lifetime. But the thing that's important to understand is, January 6th just didn't come out of the blue, and it didn't really happen in a vacuum, right? I mean, this is something that had been brewing for years, decades, really. Think about the Tea Party from 10 years ago and some of these other movements. All of them are rooted in values such as white supremacy, misogyny, a group that's had a amount of control in our society that has dominated the marginalized, dominated people of color, restricted rights for women, and in recent years they've seen threats to their hegemony. They see their powers at risk of being taken away, and Trump's defeat and the fact that Joe Biden was going to be inaugurated as president caused this to boil over the top. And the problem, though, is it would be bad enough if it was just that one horrible day, but I think all of us here know that it wasn't just that horrible day, that really the coup, because that's what January 6th was, it was a coup to keep Donald Trump in power unlawfully, and that coup is still going on. There are hundreds of bills in every state legislature that has a strong Republican presence is either passing or debating bills that would somehow restrict voting, eliminate drop boxes, eliminate early voting. The bill in Georgia where you couldn't give somebody a water bottle on a voting line. Any possible way to make voting less frequent, more difficult, more onerous is being considered by Republican legislatures. And that's even not the most alarming thing, really. The most alarming thing is these bills that are out there that would give state legislatures the power in some states to override the will of the voters, basically, and appoint members to the Electoral College. I think a lot of you have followed the last couple of weeks, this story stemming from January 6th about these fake elector slates that were submitted is part of the coup conspiracy. Well, I mean, they're passing laws in a number of states to make it easier to do that. And we've seen, Donald Trump and what's left of his movement are out there trying to elect the most radical secretaries of state, who are basically the people who certify these elections. From Georgia to Texas to any states. As you may know, Pennsylvania, the Secretary of State is appointed by the governor, and if a true Trumpist like Doug Mastriano gets elected governor of Pennsylvania, he'll be appointing the Secretary of State, and that will probably be somebody who believes in the big lie that Biden didn't win the 2020 election, that somehow there was massive voter fraud and Trump was cheated. So these are the threats. These are the things that when you guys are out there talking to voters, when you guys go to community meetings, and when you guys are working on all the good projects that you guys are working on, you need to make sure that I think, it's important that you make sure the average voter knows that these things are going on, because look, I mean, we live in a difficult time. People are trying to get through COVID. If you're trying to feed your family on a true middle class budget, it is painful to see gasoline at $4 a gallon, and it is painful to go to the supermarket and have to pay 30% more for meat, or not even to see meat on the shelves in some cases. We can't pretend those things are real, and it's very worrisome that these problems, and you've seen them reflected in President Biden's approval rating going down, and it's really worrisome that apathy and despair is going to be out there in the electorate going into election day, and that's just a recipe for a big Republican victory. And if that happens, then our democracy is gone, frankly. So as you guys transition into working more on the midterm elections, as many of you are going to be this coming year, I mean, you basically have to fight a two-front war. I mean, you have to, Democrats really have to fight a two-front war. I mean, we need to press our Democratic leaders to be doing more to pass some of these things, either in Washington or where they can, to show voters that the Democrats are the party that is going to fight for everyday people. That they're going to fight for voting rights. They're going to fight for reproductive rights. They're going to fight on climate change. They're going to fight against student debt, which I think is one of the most underrated problems out there that's affecting so many people. I mean, the Biden administration has powers to do things on student debt, to cancel some of the student debt that's out there. They have power to do more on issues like immigration, and if they do that, and that'll make your job easier, because you need to convince people that 2022 is not a time for apathy. That we saw in 2018 what Democrats can do if they get their voters out to the polls, and people were charged up. I mean, people had an enemy that they understood and they were mad about, and that was Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was a great rallying cry in 2018 and 2020 to get voters out to the poll. Well, now in 2022, Donald Trump's not going to be on the ballot, but what is going to be on the ballot is democracy itself. That's a much more abstract concept. It's harder to get people to understand what that means. So I think it's great that you're having this meeting today, and it's great you're hearing from people like Chris Rabb, who's a fantastic representative, because what you guys discuss here in terms of the best ideas for getting this message out there to voters, is what we need. It's going to mean so much. I mean, just quickly, I want to leave a lot of time for questions, but I think some of the things we're seeing right now are what we're going to see more of if we don't succeed in the midterms, if we don't succeed in November. You're seeing all this book banning out there. You've seen books like Mouse and The Bluest Eye being banned in these communities. It's a new kind of McCarthyism basically that's out there. You're going to see increased pressure to restrict reproductive rights. Again, you're going to see more of these bills about about counting the votes in the 2024 presidential election. There's the famous line from Joseph Stalin about the vote isn't as important as who counts the votes. And we never thought this would be an issue in the United States of America, but now it's an issue. So those are the stakes. You guys are the ones who have the unenvious task, I guess it is, of being out there on the front lines, trying to raise awareness, because that's what it's all about. I think most of us support the American experiment in democracy, and we want to keep it going. And people need to be aware and understand these threats. And you guys have done so much in the last 15 years to raise awareness on important issues, and we've seen some of the results. And 2022, for better or worse, is going to be the time people need to up their game. And I have a lot of faith you can do it. Like I said, I'll be lobbying my bombs 3 times a week from the back line. I'm looking forward to answering the questions and hear from you. Like Margaret said, I've got a book coming out in August, which I guess I'd be a bad author if I didn't mention it really quickly. It's called After the Ivory Tower Falls, and it's a look at what's happened to the American way of college ever since World War II, and the ups and downs of that, and how that's affected our politics. We have a big college, non-college divide in this country, and my book tries to explain how that happens and how we can make higher education more accessible to more people, and reduce some of the divisions. So it's going to be a big year for me, and it's going to be a big year for you. And again, it was quite an honor to speak to you, and now I'm happy to answer some questions that any of you might have.
Okay, thank you, Will. Thank you for your analysis and your call to action. So now we're going to hear from Piero, who is monitoring the chat room and is going to present some questions to you. Take it away, Stan.
A lot of questions, so let's get started. Elena asks, what do you think people in Philly who feel disillusioned with politics need to hear to get them voting?
I think, again, you have to remind them that, they might be disappointed that the Democrats haven't done this or that, but, like I was talking about, the things that Republicans are already doing in the areas where they have control, in terms of banning books, in terms of reproductive rights, in terms of undoing whatever progress we made on climate change. I think people need to see this as an alternative. My big concern is that for a lot of voters, this is just going to be a referendum on Joe Biden, and this will be a referendum. Even in local elections where Joe Biden's not shouldn't be a factor, but that's kind of the midterm mentality, right? That this is a referendum on the incumbent president, but it's not a referendum. It's two very competing worldviews that are out there, and people need to understand that if they don't vote, or if they feel apathetic, or if they are trying to send a message out here, we have a Republican movement that I think some of your leaders have pointed out is basically promoting a kind of fascism, and that's just unacceptable. And I think voters need to see the election in those terms as much as they can.
Well, along those lines of messaging, Eric Sternfeld says, my perception is that the right seems more proficient at weaponizing language. Do you have suggestions for how we can mitigate the impact of demonizing us by use of such terms as woke mob and other similar niceties?
Well, they are good at messaging. I think it was interesting to see that. I remember in the 2020 campaign where you had these Republicans who supported Joe Biden, who called themselves the Lincoln Project, and I'm not a big fan of some of those people, but some of the ads they did were very good, and it's kind of frustrating. It makes you wonder, why are Republicans better at messaging sometimes than Democrats? But I think when people are out there complaining about the woke mob, I think what progressives are really fighting for is, for the most part, is free expression. These woke mob complaints, they're finding isolated incidents at Oberlin College or something, where a group of undergrads did something that maybe wasn't the greatest thing or whatever. But we're seeing situations right now where some of the biggest states in the country, like Florida or Texas, are restricting what teachers can say in the classroom. They're restricting books. In Virginia, Glenn Youngkin has this tip line where people can rat out teachers, which is something like kind of out of the East German Stasi or something like that. I think you have to make it clear. I make it clear that progressives want a world of free expression, and try and frame things in constitutional values, because I think the things that progressives are fighting for are the same values that are embedded in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution.
Okay. Peter Handler wonders if you would equate what's happening here to the fall of democracy in Germany in 1933-34, and others like Susan Sachs have asked whether or not we can learn lessons about oncoming authoritarian rule from the way in which Black folks managed to overcome the racist backlash from the ending of Reconstruction. So how do you equate this time to, I guess, both Germany 33, 34, and after Reconstruction in the US?
Well, yeah, after Reconstruction was not a good time, absolutely, and it's something they really should teach our students about more in school. Kind of the same with the rise of Nazi Germany. In that, I'm a baby boomer. I grew up, kind of in the shadow of World War II, and we were kind of taught that what happened in Germany was this exceptional evil, and the truth is, I mean, they talk about the banality of evil, right? As Hannah Arendt said, and the truth is that fascism can creep its way in very easily with an apathetic and complacent public. I mean, the Nazi Party in Germany never got 50% of the vote in an election. I think the most they got was 42% or something like that. But the rest of the public was either too divided or too apathetic to stop them. And once they got in power, they were ruthless about implementing things. And that's the fear I have for today. If Donald Trump is somehow restored to the presidency in 2024, one way or the other, these people are going to be ruthless in punishing their enemies and doing things that we never thought was possible in America. So it's just a wake-up call for the rest of us that this is the fight of our lives, and we have to take it as seriously as we possibly can.
Thank you, Will. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions, but we really appreciate your spending time with us today and sharing your insights. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And if people want to follow up with me, I'm very reachable. My email address is wbunch@inquirer.com. You can always ask me a question by email. Sign up for my newsletter, inquirer.com/bunch, and it's very interactive, and it comes out every Tuesday. So there's a lot of ways for us to stay in touch. So I hope we will do that. I hope you guys will all stay in touch with me, and good luck going forward. We really need you to do well, and you guys will.
Thank you. Now I'm going to turn this over to a longtime justice advocate and PNN member, Nate Holt. Nate.
Hi, thank you, Gloria. Hi, everyone. I'm Nate Holt. Before we introduce our plans for 2022, I want to take a moment to remind you of just a few examples of the good work that Philly Neighborhood Networks has done. We've endorsed and supported progressive candidates for office, propelling them to victory, knocking doors, making calls, working at polling locations. And we've engaged our neighbors on consequential issues such as affordable housing, a cleaner environment, police accountability, a better education for our children, and public banking. So keeping an organization like PNN operating takes a lot of work, much of which comes from the dedication of many of you at today's meeting. You've knocked those doors, you've made those calls, you've taken part in actions and helped us plan events, and we thank you. But ask yourself, how many hundreds or thousands of doors can I personally knock this year? Do I have spare time in my life to manage teams of dozens and dozens of people to accomplish our goals? In order for us to do this work with real impact, we need a team of professional organizers to lead the planning, run the workshops, and take on all the day-to-day tasks that keep PNN running. Some of you have already donated to PNN, and some of you have become monthly sustainers. We thank you for that gift, but we need to raise a lot more money to maintain our productivity. So please think about what you really feel comfortable giving and then give a little bit more. The link to donate to PNN is in the chat or will be momentarily. Make a monthly recurring contribution. That is the lifeblood of our organization. Or if you only want to donate once, make it count. Make it a 3-digit donation or more. Skip your next purchase from Jeff Bezos and bring democracy to life in your neighborhood instead. All right, so that's my pitch. Please be generous. And now to talk about the activities that you will be funding with your investment is our organizing director, Tim Brown.
All right. Hey, listen, thanks there. Thanks, Nate. And hi, folks. As Will made clear in his remarks, our nation's future hangs in the balance. And as the real patriots, we must do everything we can to stave off not only fascism, but to move forward to a more progressive future for our nation. We do that by dedicating some of our time to make a positive difference in our world. As our former House Speaker, Tip O'Neill, once proclaimed, all politics is local. And by this, he meant that we have our greatest opportunity for making a difference in our nation by participating in our state, in our city, and particularly in our neighborhoods. Now, anyone who's knocked a door or made a phone call for political work has no doubt heard the following. You ignore me all year long, only to come around at election time when you need my vote. Now, sadly, this is mainly true because our electoral work is often driven by the needs of political parties and candidates, right? So necessarily, they only throw resources into campaigning during the election season. Now, while this may be efficient for candidates, it's no way to run a democracy. If we want to succeed, if we want to save our democracy, we need to change the way we organize. And we need to do this not as extras in someone else's political campaign, but as an army of allies and partners from our own neighborhoods. Look, politics is not a spectator sport. If we want to save our city, our state, our country, we need to do this ourselves. So the balance of today's meeting will be dedicated to our efforts at building democracy. What does this mean? Well, democracy building happens when you build your sense of community. And community building happens all year long, not just at election time. And it's based on our shared values and concerns within our community. Now, you've all probably heard me use the phrase engage, educate, and empower. And it's not just a catchy alliterative phrase. I mean, it is catchy, right? But the motto, it's a motto that I organize by it. And here's what I mean by it. By engaging our neighbors in honest conversation about shared concerns, we demonstrate that we care about their welfare. By taking part in activities and events together, we help to educate each other about the solutions to those shared concerns. And by encouraging them to join us in this work, we empower them to affect real change, change that radiates outside of our own neighborhoods and to the world beyond. Now, building community by educating and engaging our neighbors is critical if we want to build a real sense of community and build for our electoral work and make it effective. And we'll be talking about our electoral plan shortly. But before we do, I'd like to introduce Elena Lynn. Elena is a history teacher, an activist, currently a stay-at-home mom, has been involved in many of these projects, and she's going to talk to us about the importance of getting involved in community building work that we do. And she'll introduce our action committee leaders, who will talk to you about the projects and campaigns they'll be taking on this year. Elena, it's up to you.
Thanks, Tim. So I really believe Tim is right that working at the local level is important. It helps us build trust. It helps us solve our everyday problems, and it is essential to our survival as a community and as a nation. But I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're all feeling a little tired. Not only those of us with a teething 10-month-old at home like me, but after 2 years of pandemic and 6 years of growing fascism, we can find ourselves paralyzed by the enormity of the tasks before us. So I wanted to share something that has been helping me to stay committed to this work. The author Oliver Burkeman, in his book 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals is the subtitle, asked the question, how would you spend your days differently if you didn't care so much about seeing your actions reach fruition? He calls on us to remember that we're part of a long chain of people who have done the work before us and will pick up where we leave off. Put another way, we know that our problems don't have instant solutions. Sometimes it takes longer than we'd like to see results. But what if we focus on finding joy in the work itself and in the connections that we make with our neighbors? This joy and these connections help me to integrate activism into my life in a way that is sustaining and fulfilling. And I invite all of you here today to contemplate what you find fulfilling as we hear from our action committees. There's a lot that will be accomplished this year as we take on issues around education, the environment, housing, healthcare, and economic justice. During our members' remarks, you'll see a sign-up form in the chat. Please take a moment to get involved in something that you love doing. I promise it will make you feel better about everything that's going on right now, even if it won't fix it right away. So first, let me introduce Eileen Poses from our Education Action Committee to talk about what they plan to take on this year.
Hi, the Education Action Committee will be focused on several important issues this year: student voting, fair funding, educational priorities, and an elected school board in Philadelphia. With regard to student voting, NN has collaborated with allies to ask the Philadelphia Board of Education to institute a student voter education and registration policy. Over 1,000 emails went out to board members, city council members, and the mayor's office of education. These efforts seem to have paid off, and we anticipate that this policy will be voted on at the board's next meeting in February. There will still be a lot of work to do to implement this policy. Regarding fair funding for our schools, only 11% of our state schools currently pass through the fair funding formula that was established in 2015. As a result, the state underfunds Philadelphia and other municipalities with large minority populations by thousands of dollars per pupil each year. However, there is a lawsuit currently being heard in Commonwealth Court that asks the state to allocate all basic education funding according to a fair funding formula. We have been participating with allies on bus trips to Harrisburg and other events in support of this lawsuit. Regarding educational priorities, the school district has misspent millions of tax dollars. Rather than spending money on teachers and infrastructure, the district spends funds on redundant programs, scripted curriculums, inadequate professional development, as well as millions of dollars that go to charter schools because of what our former auditor general termed the worst charter law in the country. The first thing we need to do is fix the school buildings. We have been collaborating with the Healthy School Initiative to address the ongoing problems of asbestos, lead paint, lead in the water, and mold in our schools. There is much left to be done. Regarding our school board, several years ago, we helped to abolish the School Reform Commission. Now that we once again have a local school board, it is time for those school board members to be elected rather than appointed by the mayor. To that end, we are collaborating with our allies to achieve this goal. In the coming year, we're going to need your help to participate in actions on these issues with our partners. Together, we can win victories for our children. If you'd like to take part in this work, then click on the sign up link provided in the chat or go to phillynn.org and sign up for our action committee.
Next, thank you so much, Eileen. Next, I would like to introduce Hillary Baum from the Environment Action Committee to talk about their work.
Hi, everybody. 2021 was a busy year for the Environment Action Committee. We kicked off a number of projects and activities that are continuing full speed ahead into 2022, and we need your participation to reach our goals. We've got a lot going on. First, we've been active on the local front to push for more effective legislation to end the citywide use of plastic shopping bags, focusing on an amendment the coalition we are part of is calling the BYO bag bill. On the regional level, we're working with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network to achieve a full ban on fracking that would prohibit not only fracking, which already is banned, but also the dumping of toxic and radioactive fracking wastewater from elsewhere into our watershed and the removal of our water to support fracking operations where they are not banned. On the federal level, we're working with regional allies to ban the Baum trains that are slated to transport highly volatile liquid natural gas by rail through the Philadelphia corridor for export. Our net zero community education project is helping our neighbors learn what they can do to reduce climate risk and increase resilience by producing presentations to help other groups spread the word. We'll continue to focus on climate education as we head into our collective work on the upcoming elections. Folks from this particular project also maintain the Northwest Philly Climate Action Network Google group and welcome new members to the listserv in addition to volunteers for all of this work. Over the last few months, we've been collaborating with the Plastic Reduction Task Force of Weaver's Way Co-op to undertake a campaign to encourage the hundreds of local suppliers to Philadelphia's cooperatives to transition to packaging that will reduce plastics and reduce waste. And lastly, we're co-hosting Philly Talks Trash, a virtual series on waste, the third Thursday of every month. Our program for February 17th is food, waste reduction, and recovery. You can find out more about it from the PNN newsletter. So please join us on our many projects. You can email us through PNN by clicking on the link that I'm sure will be in the chat. And also check our page in the PNN website for our latest news. We hope if you join us, we'll certainly work to connect you with any of the projects that we're working on that interest you. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, Gail Loney is our chair of the Housing Action Committee. She's going to let you in on what they'll be taking on this year.
Hi. Why does it always take a disaster for people to actually see what's right in front of them? Why do these disasters seem to be the extreme of a long overdue situation that we all know about, but always have an excuse for not rectifying? And why do babies have to lose their lives for those who could and should have done something earlier, like stand up for what's decent and right? The fire that took the lives of 12 people should have never happened and could have been averted. What does this say about the state of housing in Philadelphia and the people who run it? That is what the Housing Committee hopes to dig into and find out about. We want to talk to the people most affected and what their real needs actually are. We want to talk to the people who are supposed to be in charge in addressing these issues to find out why there isn't more progress and urgency to resolve them. We're also going to talk about Good Cause, which is a legislation that was written to help support renters and how to make it better for them. These and other issues around access, accountability, and availability while working collaboratively with others are some of the things we'd like to take on this year. But no matter what we are talking about or digging into, please remember, just because you have a home does not mean everyone else does. We all deserve a home. Therefore, we have to make housing a right for everyone, and we have to do it now. So please join us by signing up using the link in the chat or go to our website and sign up. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Next, we have Dr. Walter Tsu. He is the chair of our Healthcare Action Committee. Go ahead, Walter.
Hi. Neighborhood Networks believes that healthcare is a public good and a human right. And that's why we are dedicated to Medicare for All. HR 1976 is the Congressional Medicare for All bill, which is currently co-sponsored by 119 members of Congress. Representatives Brendan Boyle, Matt Cartwright, and Susan Wild are co-sponsors. But inexplicably, Representative Dwight Evans, Mary Gay Scanlon, Madeline Dean, and Chrissy Houlihan are not co-sponsors. We believe these representatives need to get on board, and we will be working with our members on a campaign to pressure them to co-sponsor HR 1976. We also support the health department's efforts to expand access to care in Philadelphia. The city has 8 health centers that provide ambulatory care services for the low-income communities and 1 free STD clinic. There has not been a new Philadelphia Health Center in 30 years, despite increases in diversity in the city's population. Philadelphia is also the largest US city without a public hospital. The health centers are a major effort to provide medical services for the uninsured. Health Center 10 in Northeast Philadelphia has historically had a huge demand for services prior to the pandemic, with waiting times for new appointments in months, not years, not weeks. If the city moves forward on creating a health center, Neighborhood Networks will be supporting this effort. If you want to help with this work, use the link on the chat to sign up. Finally, we support the public health effort to vaccinate. The city has 1.1 million who are fully vaccinated, but only 340,000 who have been boosted. The lowest numbers are among Black and Brown communities. With the highly contagious Omicron variant, it is imperative that everyone gets vaccinated and boosted. As the former city health commissioner, trust me when I tell you that there are no questions that fully vaccinated and boosted individuals will be able to avoid getting seriously ill or hospitalized. So do it for yourself and your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter. Finally, I'd like to introduce Jasmine Hanna, our social media coordinator, to talk about all the ways you can connect with others.
You missed one, Elena. That would be me.
I apologize. I was wondering where you were, but you're not on my script. So here we have Stan Shapiro to tell us about public banking right before we get to Jasmine.
Thank you. Okay, so PNN has been a leader, no, the leader actually, in the city's public banking movement from its inception about 10 years ago. We've worked at it relentlessly, and we intend to continue until this city has its own bank. So why is that? Well, first, the very existence of a public bank strikes a blow against the dominance of big banks over our economy, and in particular, Wall Street's use of our own city government's resources to essentially destroy the planet. These mega banks take our collective wealth, that's basically what city monies are, and use it to finance virtually every evil enterprise in the world, be they private prisons, polluters, union busters, arms manufacturers, drug manufacturers, cigarette companies, or monopolies of every kind. One of the most important things a public bank would do would be to move city funds out of those banks and put them under public control. And when we control those funds, we would invest them in nice things that the majority of Philadelphians want and need, like neighborhood-based businesses, co-op enterprises, low-income housing, solar conversions, and repair of our physical assets like schools, libraries, rec centers, streets. And we would no longer need to pay usurious interest rates to fund those things. Currently, our debt service, the city's debt service, is over $400 million a year, about 40% of which is interest. That interest amount alone would pay the entire yearly budget of the recreation department and free library. Imagine if we could increase funding for the free library by half with a lot left over to support affordable housing. If we cut fees to Wall Street, we can do it. A bill that would take the first step toward creating a public bank is now pending in City Council, and it will probably come up for final passage next month. Look for updates from us on when the council vote will actually happen. You can be part of getting it past the finish line, so stay tuned and sign up on that form if you'd like to be actively engaged. And we'll be telling you soon how you can help get this done very soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Stan. And now I turn to Jasmine Hanna, who's going to help us connect with each other.
Hi, I'm Jasmine, and I'm our media coordinator. And social media has been vital for us in 2021, not just because of the pandemic where we can't see each other in person, but also because it's a great way to connect with our partnering organizations around Philly and new members that may not have been here before. So welcome, and I'm just going to take a quick tour of our social media platforms. Now, this may look like a lot at first, but we have 3 main platforms that we use: Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And each of those square codes can be scanned with your phone. If you have a camera on your phone nearby, you can open up the camera part of your phone and hold it up to one of the codes, and a notification will appear on your phone that says QR code detected. And you can use that to follow our Twitter, our Instagram, or our Facebook. Now, all of these are linked on our website, or if you follow one of our platforms, there's links to any of our other platforms. But this is really vital because we post about upcoming events, news issues, smaller campaigns like letter writing or calling your congressman, small calls to action throughout the year that really make a huge difference in our issue-based projects. And, you know, if you're not on social media, I don't blame you at all. We also have a website where we post all of our event listings. We have blogs that you can read, articles from other pages. You can register for events, all things like that. And we've redesigned our website in the past 6 months to accommodate the growth of our action committees and to put a new focus on our issue-based campaigns. So feel free to check that out. You can reach us at phillynn.org. And if you want to see a recorded Zoom meeting or an event that you couldn't get to, you can always go to our YouTube channel, Philly Neighborhood Networks, and we have all of our recorded Zooms from the past year that you can reach there. So that's really convenient. This meeting will be there too. And in the next year, you will also be able to see us on 92.9 FM Germantown Radio, which will also be on our YouTube channel as a video. You can see us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter Spaces, which is a new live format, and virtual activist workshops every month. So this coming month, we have Becoming an Activist Organizer on February 16th, and a movie night where we're going to watch Changing the World, a movie about legendary organizer Heather Booth, on February 24th. So, you know, you can always get involved in small ways as well.
Tim, you're muted.
Yeah, okay. Hey, thank you, Jasmine. And thanks to Elena and to all of our action committee members, leaders for their reports. You know, when you join an action committee, you have an opportunity to take part in the planning, the strategies and the tactics of all the actions and events that influence decision makers, right? As well as our radio shows or movie nights. There's all sorts of things you can do, lots of fun activities. So please take a moment to use the chat, sign up to take part in this. And we'll be reaching out beyond our city's borders to confront decision makers in Harrisburg and elsewhere, where we're going to have direct actions that are going to put them on the spot and hopefully make them make the right decisions. There'll be marches, sit downs, other actions. Please, if you sign up, we'll make sure that we keep you in the loop with all of this. Now, of course, our work is made easier when we have allies in positions of power, right? So endorsing the right candidates and making sure that they get elected is really an important aspect of what we do. So to discuss both of these topics, I'd like to introduce our steering committee member, Steve Paul.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate that. So it's, as Tim said, it's that time of the year again, endorsement time. So as an organization, we are rooted in community. And as an organization that's rooted in community, our power really comes from you all, the members, right? Not only do you all work to get elected leaders elected, but we also keep those elected officials accountable to our issues. The overall goal for us is always rewarding candidates who both share our values and our policies, and more importantly, comes from our community. And political candidates, they know and understand that we, Neighborhood Network, take that work very seriously. So it's no surprise, twice a year, they come to us for our endorsement. They do this because they know that an endorsement from PNN can increase their recognition and establish credibility with our neighbors, thus increasing their chances of getting elected to public office. For us, though, it's about flexing our political power. So here's our timeline for this election cycle. First, our plan is to send out questionnaires to specific targeted races starting on February 4th, next week. Candidates will have until February 18th to actually return those questionnaires to us. Interviews will be taking place between February 18th and March 13th. And then the steering committee will come back and meet, deliberate, and make recommendation to you all as members on March 15th. And we'll send some of these dates around so you don't have to memorize them right now. And then once we deliberate and have recommendations to you all on March 15th, you will have an opportunity to vote as members between March 17th to March 22nd. Once voting is over, we will announce our endorsements publicly via email, social media, et cetera, on March 25th. And then, of course, the fun part begins. PNL will get out the vote for our candidates starting April all the way up to the primary elections, which is now May 17th. One thing to note is that in order to vote, to be a voting member of NN, you must have made a contribution either last year in 2021 or this year in 2022. So again, if you have not made a donation, please take a moment to do so using the link that should be coming up in the chat. Regardless though, we hope you work with us this election to get the best people elected to public office. I think we've all heard from some of the speakers today how important it is to have the right representative representing us in the halls of power. With that being said, speaking of great elected officials, I'm now going to introduce a good friend of Philadelphia Neighborhood Networks, who really doesn't need an introduction, State Representative Chris Rabb, who's been on the front line in Harrisburg, fighting on a whole host of issues, including democracy, a woman's right to choose, immigration, as well as attempts to bring back mass incarceration to our communities. He's an amazing representative, and we are always happy when he's here to join us. The representative will be talking about the struggles to preserve our democracy and how that actually relates to this upcoming election as we do our work. Afterwards, we are going to take about 5 minutes of Q&A from you all. So if you have any questions while Representative Rabb is speaking, please include them in the chat, and then I will basically take your questions for about 5 minutes. And if we don't get to your questions, don't worry, the representative will answer them, and we will be sending them in a follow-up email as well. With that said, Representative Rabb.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. Let me see some love. I know you're all muted. Let me see your hands. Let me see your faces. It's so good to see all of you. I know most of you. Many of you are my neighbors, friends, constituents who were there from the very beginning when I was not supposed to have won. But even before then, I was at some of the first neighborhood networks meetings. Gloria, I don't know if you recognize this little boy, but I brought him in a car seat because that was the only thing that would keep him asleep. When he was like 1. So this is what my eldest son looked like when I first started attending organizing meetings when Neighborhood Networks was getting off the ground. This little boy just voted in his first election last year, and he's 18 years old. And in the primary, he'll be able to vote for his daddy. What I can tell him is what district I'll be representing, because I don't know. But whatever it is, whatever district they give me is the district I'll run in. And I look forward to all of your continued support, because I'll be honest, Neighborhood Networks was the only non-union organization, not anti-union, but non-union organization that supported my initial run. It was a lonely path to victory. It was an uphill battle. I like to joke that the front runner that I challenged in 2016 had every endorsement except Jesus and my mother. Now, all those endorsements were not enough. What was enough was knocking on doors, was making those small contributions, was telling folks about me because I wasn't a household name. And so when I go after the endorsement of neighborhood networks, it's really not for the endorsement. It's for the work that comes from that endorsement, because you've sought fit to say it's not just about putting your brand on a candidacy or a campaign. It's about doing the work. It's about being on the front lines, and that you are a rare beast, because most folks that do the endorsements don't do the work. In fact, knocking on the doors of our neighbors is even more important than cutting a check. Now, that's not to say cutting a check isn't useful. It is, particularly if it's well spent, which is why in my first election, I paid young people $15 an hour. I intend to pay them much more in this coming election, regardless of who may be challenging me. And even if I don't have a challenger, I will be paying a living wage. But we're talking about preserving democracy. That's the issue. And, you know, Will Bunch said something that I strongly disagree with. He said he's not on the front lines. And that really bothered me, because I hear a lot of you saying you're not on the front lines, and you're saying people like me are on the front lines because I'm battling fascists and white supremacists in Harrisburg. That's not the only front line. It's not the only front line. And you don't have to be in elected office or appointed office to be on the front lines. You don't need a college degree or a driver's license to be on the front lines. This is what I tell young people when I talk to them. You are on the front lines every time you knock on a door or make a phone call. You're on the front lines. Every time you're educating yourself and sharing that information with others in good faith, you're on the front lines. And, you know, I appreciate Will's humility, but it's a disservice. And I don't know if you're still on, Will, but you are on the front lines, because we are battling people who are weaponizing language to dehumanize. Does that sound familiar, folks? That's Nazi Germany. It is the playbook of fascism to dehumanize first, to make it easier to destroy communities that are not coming along with whatever the people in power seek to do. So whether people want to say we're the woke mob or they want to say we're tree huggers, what I do when I'm around conservatives who believe more in fracking than human beings, I say I'm an unapologetic tree hugger. And I just pull that weight of that insult from them, because I used it first. I take pictures of me hugging trees just to make the point. That's not something to be apologetic about, nor should our defense of democracy itself. We are having a conversation now, 24 hours, not even 24 hours, after a conservative appellate court, the second highest in our state, has deemed early voting unconstitutional. Now, there was a stay by the state Supreme Court, and there's a dissent within the Commonwealth Court that says this is bogus. I'm confident that the state Supreme Court, where there were 3 Democrats who we helped get elected in 2015, the first time in literally 200 years, such that the state Supreme Court has more enlightened jurists than the Commonwealth Court, that is also currently considering full and fair funding of public education. But if they were to prevail, we wouldn't have vote by mail or drop boxes in Pennsylvania in this upcoming primary. But here's an irony that I think you all should note if you didn't already know. Virtually 100% of my Republican colleagues voted for Act 77 in 2019. It's okay if you didn't know that fact, because unlike Will Bunch sharing important information, a lot of mainstream media do not report on these types of things. The hypocrisy that the same Republicans who said the votes were stolen and early voting is inherently this or that were the very same people who voted for it. In fact, a higher proportion of Republicans voted for what would become Act 77 than Democrats. And to be perfectly transparent, I voted against it. Why did I vote against it? I voted against it because I didn't like the governor negotiating with Republicans behind the backs of elected Democrats and Black and brown communities. I felt that he made a really challenging bargain. And unfortunately, we lost a number of elected positions on the state level as a result of removing party line voting. So even though I introduced my own set of bills that promoted all the things that were part of Act 77, I opposed it on principle. But Republicans, they're behind it 100%. You'd never know it following their social media threads. I am in Harrisburg fighting against judicial gerrymandering and voter ID and other pernicious voter suppression acts that are not new. They are, in fact, the same things that Democrats did in the South. How do I know this? Because my people come from the South. My people come from the South. This is Rab's Meat Market in Columbus, Mississippi, where Democrats did not think it was wise to let Negroes go to public education, get public education after the 10th grade. And this is another ancestor, John Henry Murphy Sr., who founded the Baltimore Afro newspaper. The Afro-American newspaper was so powerful that Black folk in some parts of the country could not be seen holding it because it had too much knowledge that would scare white supremacists. There were people who were lynched because they had copies of my family's newspaper. Education is indeed power. Tim Brown was right. Engage, educate, empower. But you know what? Part of the problem are elected officials who think that everyone should just know all of this stuff, just coming, from osmosis. We have a responsibility as your elected officials, as public servants, to connect the dots. If I don't understand what your felt needs are as community members, how am I supposed to connect the dots between what you care about and what priorities you embrace and the work that I do 104 miles from Philadelphia? That's my responsibility. And neighborhood networks can keep folks accountable. You certainly keep me accountable, but there's a whole lot of other electeds who need a lot more work. So I say all this to say that we're in a time where we can't take any of this stuff for granted, because Republicans are desperate. They have to rig the system, as has happened before with gerrymandering and other forms of voter suppression, to maintain power in a state where there's 600,000 more registered Democrats and a lot of unaffiliated voters who may vote the right way in elections that matter, which are all elections. I literally just came from the Democratic State Committee right before this meeting occurred. There was no vote for endorsement or there's no endorsement made for US Senate. They did endorse not Stan Shapiro, but Josh Shapiro and my colleague, Representative Austin Davis from Allegheny County for Lieutenant Governor. But that was 300 people in a closed door meeting. It does not represent the 13 million people, a small percentage of whom vote on a regular basis. And we can talk about the halls of power. We can talk about party politics and partisanship. All of that stuff matters. But let's bring it home a bit when we talk about democracy. If part of our democracy is building a vibrant, growing, and informed electorate, what about the electorate that already exists here in Philly, where the majority of folks do not come out to vote? And in fact, even if already registered Black Democrats, which is not all the electorate in Philly, but just take that subset, came out to vote, we would have won every judicial election in this past election cycle. we had more votes from already registered Black Democrats. And I'm not here as a partisan, but I'm just taking a known entity in our own backyard. There are more votes there than the margin of victory for the Republicans who are now in the judiciary, who in fact are part of the very decision that are trying to roll back expansion of voting rights for the upcoming primary. But it's our responsibility, and I hear the alarm, it's our responsibility to connect the dots. We have to reach people where they are. That doesn't mean talking down to people, but it means listening and engaging in good faith. All of us, not just folks in elective office. And you all are doing it. So I'm preaching to the choir. But I need your help, because if you know me, you know that I kind of roll in an independent fashion. I don't really work with establishment Democrats on the electoral side. I work with them in the government side. This has to be a people-powered movement, and you all know that. You all are responsible for many of my victories, collectivist victories that I'm very proud of. But we have to continue doing that work, and May, or whenever the primary may ultimately be, if it's pushed back, we have to organize and we have to connect the dots and engage our neighbors in good faith and do the work. And I'm excited and I'm hopeful, because I'm talking to folks who already know how to do it, because you've been doing it for years. So I thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions and raise good trouble.
Great. Thank you, Representative Rad. So just want to let folks know we're running a little behind. So we're going to take one question, and then answer the rest in chat and follow-up emails. So Representative, you talked a lot about just, even in your presentation, about the power of the people, right? And just the current state of the General Assembly right now and redistricting. So, and you talked a little bit about the democratically endorsed folks for governor and lieutenant governor. So even if, the Democrats were able to maintain the governor's mansion or lieutenant governor's seat, and we were able to chip away at the majority that the Republicans have in the General Assembly, we would end up sort of in the same situation we are in right now, right? And the reason I'm saying that is the Republicans over the last couple of 2-3 years have been using sort of the constitutional amendment process to govern. They took away the governor's emergency power away through constitutional amendment. They're introducing a bunch of legislation to introduce a whole host of constitutional amendment, which is basically a process of putting legislation on the ballot. And we know, unfortunately, a lot of those ballots get passed for a whole host of reasons. So I guess my question is, the question where the person's asking is what can we do to make people aware of the importance of these constitutional amendment, and how can we push back as a community if this is the way that Republicans are going to continue to govern in the future?
Great question. Well, I don't often speak on the campaign side, because 18 months out of every 2 years, I'm just in public servant mode on the government side. And I don't like speaking as a partisan. I like being a public servant and talking about policy, organizing and stuff, not just around election cycles, but the stuff that happens in between election cycles. But as a candidate, we need to raise hell to make sure we have a higher proportion of Democrats who will vote the right way. Because every D is not the same. I sit in front of 4 blue dog Democrats who vote more with Republicans than you could possibly imagine, but they're in Trump country and they feel that that's what they need to do to stay in office. I have problems with that, but I've represented the bluest dot in the Commonwealth for 3 terms. So I have the luxury of doing things that a lot of my colleagues don't, but there's time for moral courage. And I do things that often are challenging, even as a Democrat, even being in Philly. And some of you know any number of fights that I've waged that put me in an anomalous position. But when we're talking about constitutional amendments, we need to make sure that we have enough Democrats to sustain the governor's veto if we have a Democrat succeeding Governor Wolf. And we can't be certain that is always going to be the case. So we need to support the right people. Just because they're Democrat, that's not nearly good enough. And I have a lot of Democratic colleagues whose voting records I find deeply problematic, some even in Philadelphia. So what you do in the endorsement process, I would really love for more candidates to apply for endorsement, but I imagine a lot of them think, oh, well, they're not gonna have an influence on my race, or they're too radical for me, or whatever, I don't know. But I would love for you all to have a wider influence on candidates seeking to run in the greater Philadelphia area, because it's not a sure thing that they will vote the right way on these constitutional amendments and other controversial bills. There was a bill that would force an individual to pay for a cremation or burial for a clump of cells from a miscarried pregnancy. It passed with bipartisan support this past June. Most people don't know about it because corporate media doesn't cover that stuff. And also they don't have much of an interest to have people like me on these shows. So I have to use social media and other means and use satire. So the biggest piece of legislation that has gotten attention in my 5.5 years in office was a satirical mandatory vasectomy bill, which is going to land me on The Daily Show in a couple of weeks. Not stuff around reparations or full and fair funding of education or my 100% renewable energy, 100% energy bill. None of the things that you all are working on that are priorities. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that we hold the folks who are most likely to vote the way we want generally, vote specifically to back up the governor when he opposes controversial bills. And on the constitutional side, we have to educate. It goes back to what Tim Brown was saying. Educate is important because we just lost a ballot referendum in the last election cycle, which dilutes the power of the governor in terms of declaring emergency actions. So it's really about education, and we can't put that off on parties or corporate media or anyone else. We have to do that work, and you all know how to do that. And if I can help you do that, I know I can. I will.
Thank you, Representative.
Brad, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Always great to hear from you. Now it's time to dig into our election plans, as he was mentioning. You know, all the work we do has the ultimate goal of defending our democracy against this onslaught of fascists and white supremacists and the oligarchs who support their work. So let's look at what's at stake for 2022. We have a good chance to gain a Senate seat. Next. Jasmine, next. Yeah, great. So we have an opportunity to gain a Senate seat, which is going to make us have less concern about people like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. We have an opportunity to keep the governor's seat, which is going to be really important because of the governor's veto power. We have an opportunity to win parity in the State House for the first time in a decade. And we can take a one-seat advantage in the House of Representatives to keep the GOP from doing, attempting to do what they attempted to do in Michigan and Arizona, which was put up a slate of phony electors for the 2024 election. Now we can accomplish all of this because, as Rep. Brad mentioned, Philadelphia has an outsized role in our state and federal elections. Right now, Democrats hold a 540,000 voter registration advantage in our state, and 1 in 5 Democrats in Pennsylvania lives in Philadelphia. And we're planning to build on that power by building a broad-based outreach program that will increase registration and turnout. Now, PNS is reaching out beyond our traditional Northwest borders to neighborhoods all across our city. Our goal is to knock 70,000 doors between February and the end of August, and to register an additional 10,000 new voters. And these are ambitious goals, and we're going to accomplish them by partnering with local organizations like Free the Ballot, Open Wards, Indivisible Philadelphia, River Area Dems, Stadium Stompers, and others. We'll also be working in coalition with PA Youth Vote, Vote That John, the City Commissioner's Office, and other allies to register the 8,000 public high school students who become eligible to vote each year. Now, right now, only about 1,000 of them get registered every year. But imagine the impact it would have for Philadelphia voting if we can bring another 7,000 registered voters to the polls every single year. And we'll be working with the Haitian American Voice, who have as their goal to get an additional 10,000 voters to the poll this November. Now, we're going to accomplish this work by doing the canvassing that we talked about earlier and that Rep. Rabb talked about. We intend to knock doors across a broad target area, have good conversations with voters, talk about the issues that we share, encourage them to come out and join our action committees, find out if there's anyone in their household who's not yet registered, and encourage them to fill in a mail-in ballot application right there at the door if possible. Remember that half of the city's voters cast their ballot by mail in 2020. So we intend to increase that number. Now, you're obviously all aware of the ruling yesterday by the GOP controlled panel from the Commonwealth Court judges that overturned voting by mail in Pennsylvania. Fortunately, Governor Wolf is going to be appealing that, and a stay will be issued. And I believe we're confident that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will overturn this attempt to suppress Democratic votes. But it demonstrates just how far these people will go to deny the right to vote to anyone who doesn't vote like them. And that's why the work that we're doing is so important. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about our canvassing strategy. As I mentioned earlier, having good conversations at the doors with neighbors is by far the best way to connect with them. That face-to-face contact, the body language, the fact that you're in front of them, at least for that first conversation, makes a connection that you can't get with a phone call or a postcard or a Facebook post. And this neighbor-to-neighbor connection is a trust builder that inoculates people against the kind of anonymous propaganda that's all too prominent on social media. But, a lot of folks don't like to canvass because, quite frankly, it can be scary, right? Especially for someone who hasn't done it before. Nobody likes to get rejected at the door. Heck, I don't like to get rejected at the door. And after getting the door closed on you a few times, people tend to lose their enthusiasm for this work. So last election, we conducted an experiment to see if we could improve the experiences of our canvassers. We teamed them up, one from the neighborhood that we were knocking doors in and one from outside the neighborhood. And they went out together to knock those doors. And then we asked them afterwards what they thought of this approach. They all thought this was a great experience. But to talk about their experience are two of those canvassers right now, Cheryl Selby and Rivka Walton. Cheryl and Rivka, thanks for joining us. We're looking for Cheryl. Cheryl's in there somewhere. Hopefully we'll get Cheryl up momentarily. Can you bring her up there, Jasmine?
Yes.
There we go. Hey, guys. Okay, great. So now you two are veteran canvassers and you've often gone out on your own. So I'm curious to find out about your experience. What did you think of the buddy system, Cheryl?
She's muted.
You're muted, Cheryl.
Just trying to unmute.
Yeah, just unmute.
Not that hard.
Am I on mute?
Yeah, we're good.
Hi, Cheryl. Hi. Listen, guys, real quickly, I want to say that it's sad, but within a lot of these communities, they are not educated. They're not knowledge. They have not a clue who to vote for. And it is our mission. When I did it with the young lady, I was really like in myself. I was like, my district need to know, my ward need to know about this, because I know people don't know it. They just go straight Democrat, which is okay, but they need to know why and have more of a sense of meaning as to why they do what they do. I do field work on my regular job, so going out and knocking on doors and cold calling, I do every day, all day. So it wasn't a problem for me. And I like talking to people and saying, this is your world, this is your country. You need to stand up for it. You need to answer. You need to know what's getting ready to happen, because if we don't scream about our democracy, we are going to lose it.
Yeah. So what did you think of going out with Rivka? What?
It was nice. She kind of let me take over like I do. But I explained to her, I said, listen, from my experience, observe the outside, because you know what's going on the inside. If the outside is kind of pretty and gorgeous, you're going to meet some nice people. If it looks kind of torn down, you might meet some kind of rough people. These are little things you want to take note, like, okay, we might not get a good reception. They might not answer the door. But people, who's really proud of their home, they're glad that we came. They were nice. They said we were doing a good job. So there's a lot of people out there that want to know. They're just busy.
Good. Glad to hear.
When you talk to them, they say, hey, how y'all doing?
Good. Rivka, what was your experience?
I loved it. I went that day a little grouchy about the time and all that, but I met Cheryl and she took me under her wing and it was just fantastic. It was a neighborhood I'd never been in before. I certainly didn't know the political culture there. And, so Cheryl did take the lead and I kind of, I just was backup. I was able to, handle all the paperwork and all that. And she was the face at the door and I thought it worked great. And I don't know, Cheryl, I had a great time.
I'm just glad that people did answer the door and we did get some people to understand why we were there and what they need to know. We were trying to get people to understand about progressive judges. It was a judge election, and two people say you're doing a great job. So to me, that was good to know.
Great, I'm glad to hear. Now we are kind of running short on time here, so but just one last question, and it's kind of a yes or no answer. Would you do the buddy system again?
Oh yeah, I think that's a good idea.
All right, cool.
You gotta come in my ward, yeah.
All right, we're coming to your ward, Cheryl. Thanks both of you for sharing your insights on canvassing. Our work just won't be happening in Philadelphia. Blue Pennsylvania is an arm of Philly Neighborhood Networks, and it works outside of our city to elect progressives. And here to talk about this work is Blue Pennsylvania Director and PNN Steering Committee member Coleman Poses. Coleman?
Thanks, Tim. So any advocacy around our shared values in our city, the environment, education, firearms, minimum wage, criminal justice, is made so much more difficult to succeed unless we elect officials who are sympathetic to our causes at both the state and federal levels. We have had great success electing progressive politicians to local offices, but that success is limited by the dominance of Republican politicians in our state's legislature. Blue PA seeks to change that influence by electing candidates with more progressive values to all branches of the state and federal government. We work primarily within the 5-county area, and our activities include canvassing, phone banking, letter and postcard writing, and registering and motivating voters to elect candidates who will represent our interests in Harrisburg and Washington. If you would like to be a part of this effort, go to the Philly Neighborhood Network's website, click on the politics menu, and follow the Blue Pennsylvania link, or click on the link or links in the chat to sign up, which I'll be putting on shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Coleman. And we'll be making a lot of phone calls to voters this year as well. Many of you on this Zoom are veterans of the work we did in 2020 election when we attempted 80,000 phone calls to voters. And some of you participated in a statewide texting program that, together with our allies across the state, reached more than 1 million Pennsylvanians. To be clear, everyone involved in electoral politics knows how important this election is to our survival of our democracy. So Philly Neighborhood Networks and our allies in the city will be pulling out all the stops to make sure we deliver big in 2022. And this work begins soon. To those of you who want to run for committee person in your division, we will provide you with a turf list and any other support materials you need to knock doors in your division and collect signatures in your neighborhood. And that process begins a few weeks from now. You see it says tentative because, as Rep. Brad mentioned, things are still up in the air. The Republicans are fighting tooth and nail to try to retain the partisan advantage they gained unfairly 10 years ago. So we're going to be having some issues with that. The questionnaires are due on the 18th. The committee person petitions are due on the 8th of March. We're going to be doing our canvass planning and voter registration at the beginning of March. Our endorsements will be announced near the end of March, and then April and May we'll be doing our partisan election canvassing to get our people elected, our progressives elected. And then after the election, which we think may take place on May 17th, we're going to be doing the community building canvassing that we've been talking about all day here. That's the kind of stuff that's going to set us up for the general election in November. Then September, October, we're going to be doing voter persuasion canvassing. That's the partisan electoral work to make sure the knock doors and make sure the people come out to vote. Our get out the vote work begins October 15th, 3 weeks before the election. And on election day, we'll be knocking on doors and dragging people out to vote. So we hope you'll take part in this effort. We'll begin our planning soon. So please, if you want to be a part of this, go to the link in the chat, sign up, and we'll keep you posted. Now let's return to our chairperson, Gloria Gilman, to wrap up today's meeting.
Thanks, Tim. And thanks to everyone who helped to put together today's presentation. And thank you to all of you who came to listen today. We really appreciate it. As you heard today, there's a lot of work to be done in 2022, connecting with our neighbors, building trust, working together on our shared values and issues, and encouraging the disenfranchised to get involved in protecting democracy. If you've come to this meeting, you know what's at stake, and you know that now is the time to sign up to get involved. Please sign up in the chat. We will keep this this Zoom open for 10 minutes maybe afterwards so that people can sign up if they haven't already signed up. So please do that and get involved. Please take the time to figure out what kinds of work you would like to do, and let us know if you want us to discuss it with you. And we always welcome your donation because it takes money to do the work that we do. So we'd appreciate any donation that you can make. Be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us, and we look forward to working with you to try and save our democracy. Thank you.